place where singles shine, celebrating life, divine by design, faith and love, we intertwine, Route 77, where your journey's prime.
Welcome back to the Route 77 podcast. Today we're diving into a conversation about something we all hear but maybe don't think about: how we talk to singles. You've probably heard phrases like, when you get married, or when you have kids. But what if those words unintentionally set expectations that not everyone is called to meet? In today's episode, we're going to explore why changing those whens to ifs can create space for more freedom, grace, and understanding, especially within the Christian community. Whether you're single yourself or know someone who is, this episode is for you. Let's get to it. Welcome to the Route 77 podcast. I am your host, Natasha, and I am here with Monique and
Hello.
David.
Hello.
And we are here to talk again about stuff. I think we talked about together is that we have talked on this topic before, but I think it's good to, it was a while ago, like over a year ago, so it's not too bad to cover a similar topic because
And now that we're on
know
video,
we're on video, it's a little different, and also we'll most likely not say the exact same thing. But I think it's something that we need to just, it's because I noticed it like in myself. I've been trying to change because you get so used to the way people talk, and we often say things quite innocently, like when you get married, blah, 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 or when you become a parent, blah, blah, blah. And it's usually, you'll understand this, or I hope you have a kid just like you, or something like that to that effect. But I think we have to look at what we're saying and what it actually does, the message it's conveying. And like we've mentioned, oh, sorry, I'm just gonna. So, like we mentioned previously, we're not anti marriage or not like we don't want people to one day, maybe if it's their decision to find someone to get married to or have kids. These are all positive things. But when we use such terms like when, it's it instead of if, like it changes a lot of how it can be taken, especially when you're constantly using it. It's like when you get married, this, when you get married, this, when you get married, this, when you get married, this. And then it's basically, is it a surprise then that you assume that you're going to get married? Because you essentially have been promised this, people, in a sense, up to this point. When you have kids, you'll understand. When you have kids, you can do what you want with them or something. If you're trying, it's usually a parent in response to you not wanting to do what they say, I think. And it can be, I think, detrimental because I think some things are like when you grow up. Well, you are going to grow up. You can't stop yourself from
you
growing
can.
up. You can not mature in how you act as things, but I think different. But you can say when you, I sometimes tell the kids, when you're bigger, then you'll understand. Because sometimes the kids will be like, why does this happen or this happen? And it's not really my
Mm.
place to explain some of these things. It's a parent's job. And so I'll say, like, when you're older, when you're bigger, or even like uh, when you're bigger, then this will be easier for you. And it doesn't mean that I'm like expecting them to get 6'10", but usually if they're 6, they're going to get taller than they are at that point. So so those are the type of things I think that you can use those words because that will happen. But when it comes to saying when and married and when you're a parent, then those are things that you can't predict. Or
Well, there is this Christian group, Toby Mac, and one of their sayings is to speak life. So you want to be able to speak life into your children, especially. So things like when you graduate, when you go to university, when you find the career you want to do, or when you find the dream, what you want to do when you get older. These are life affirming things to say to your kids. But to say that when to having a relationship, getting married,
well,
having
even
kids,
saying when you go to college, when you go to university, you're very basically implying that's supposed to be
a
their
given,
next step. And it may not be
isn't it?
for some people.
Could be. But wouldn't it be a little bit more more of a positive thing to get them interested in wanting to
You could say
further
same
their
you could say the same
education?
about marriage and kids, that you want them to be positive about it and that they should want to get married. But the thing is, you don't know what they're called to do. Like sometimes a lot of people, it's like you're supposed to go to university. That's what you're supposed to do. But then you don't realize like maybe that's not your gifting. Your gifting is more hands on. So maybe a college is better for you or a trade school. But they are told that they're supposed to go to university. And what if they want to take a gap year because they're not sure what they want to do? But we have this idea like you're just supposed to go to college after you finish high school or whatever. And then you go and you take things that you're not even interested in or you don't know what you want and you take random things and it's a lot harder than if you like
Wouldn't that just be called general studies?
it depends. Like I took a specific one, but I had no desire to follow it. I was trying to get married, but you're supposed to go to college. You're supposed to go to university. That's supposed to be the next thing. I didn't have a plan. I didn't
Oh,
have a
yeah,
desire like what I wanted at.
the cycle is college, job, family, college, job, family. That's
Well, I
pretty
mean,
much
like, I
it.
just say this about the college thing and the university thing because I know a person from my old church, and that was the idea. You finish school, like high school, you go to college or university. And he went to university and a good one, but he flunked out. Like, it just wasn't his skill set, that type of stuff. But then he got into trades and he did awesome. He was so good at it. So I just saying these are bad things that you can encourage, but just changing your wording to if you go to college, if you go to university, and I think too, it also leaves the door open for them to change their mind. Because a lot of times when they're younger, it's, oh, I don't want to do X, I don't want to do X. And if you fight them on it, then they kind of have to double down. And what if they decide to change their mind and they do want to go to university or get married or whatever? Then it's harder for them to come back and say, it's not, oh, you're right, I should get married, or oh, you're right, I should go to college. It should be like you're trying to develop in them the ability that they can choose.
Yeah, but at the same time, I feel if you say if a lot of the times that will seed some kind of, oh, this may not work out. So they may not be as ambitious or as hard as you might think they would be in that scenario because they have this kind of doubt that, oh, this may not be the path of my life or my purpose.
Mm.
So then there's less effort put in. So how would you combat that in regards to saying if and if?
I think the conversation about what your dreams are, like, what is it like when you're talking to kids, specifically more when you get into the teenagers, because when you're 5, 6, 7, 8, you change your job skill bit depending
One
upon
day
what
you want to be a
toy you
fireman, the
got to
next day you
play.
want to be a lion.
Yeah, once they're a teenager, you start to have the conversations with your kids about what they think they would like to do once they're done high school. You want to encourage them to graduate as best as they can, whether if they just, oh, I'm not sure and kind of thing. Try to generate what their interests are. Like, what are you interested in? What do you like? What gives you an excitement in life that makes you want to pursue that outside of school? For me, I was talking with Natasha earlier that archaeology is really hugely interesting. Artifacts, bones, digging up stuff. That's a hugely interesting thing for me. And I did want to get into archaeology. I actually took an archaeology course in high school and did really well. And I told my dad, I want to be an archaeologist. I want to go on digs and stuff like that. And he told me, he says, there's no money in that. Oh, because apparently money was the thing. You don't want to have those kind of conversations with your kids. You don't want to discourage them from doing something that might give them an enjoyment in life. Whether it makes them a millionaire or not is not the story, because money only goes so far
And
anyways.
sometimes sorry,
And,
David, go.
and at the same time, Monique, parents have to instill some kind of faith in their children. So going to archaeology, for example, instead of focusing on the money, you can turn that to a focus on apologetics.
Oh, my parents weren't Christian.
Yeah, okay. So it's not entirely my point
No,
specifically with your parents, but just in general, if you grow up in a Christian household, because a lot of the stuff we're going to talk about is probably going to be extremely fleeting. Like by the time Christ comes back, or if we end up in World War III, then now how is important? Now how satisfying or important is your job at this point,
right.
right? So that's just how I look at a lot of things. And I said, I think last podcast too, that a lot of the time you find something you love and then you got to somehow relate it to glorify God.
And I think
Yep.
too, when it comes to encouraging your children or your young adult teens, yeah, it should be, unless it's illegal or immoral, I think you should find a way to them in it, because sometimes just going through the process of either getting educated in it or following along those lines, they can find something that maybe isn't that specific thing, but it's in that realm that they didn't know existed. Like I find as a population, we know there's like teachers and lawyers and doctors, like we're very broad and that, or like very, there's not like we know all the little minute jobs that can fall under those things that aren't so
It's a
popular.
very narrow
Yeah, I
focus
think
on the
doctor, and
careers
then
that
they're
are out
like,
there.
oh, all of a sudden they're like, oh, having such a hard time, they don't get into medical school. But then they find out then there's this other track they can go down that is in the medical profession that they actually are super good at, but would never have found it had they not gone down that path of understanding of what was down there. Like taken vet tech, if I had known that was a thing. But at the time, it was like I couldn't be a vet according to my guidance counselor at my high school because I didn't have the grades or whatever. Then that was it. That was the end. There was no, let's explore what else is down here or what you would need to do to become a vet. What would you have to do at this point or anything? There was nothing. It was just like, you can't do it. And so if you tell your child, there's a chance that they wouldn't do whatever it is, some big thing they want to do because of, it doesn't mean say, oh, just streams that fall under these different basic categories that you wouldn't even have thought of until you actually look
Yeah,
at.
I have to say something. That guidance counselor was a very bad guidance
This is my only
counselor.
experience. I was there for 1 year for actual, I was homeschooled except for that 1
Yeah,
year.
and that kind of thing to say that, oh, your grades aren't good enough. Okay, so today you need to pick up your grades if you want to become a veterinarian. So this is what you need to do. And I look forward to seeing you in 6 months to see how your grades are doing. And let's talk about it
Yeah,
again.
it was nothing like that. That's why I was like, that was my the one and only experience with the school guidance counselor in high school.
Stupid. Actually, back then, I'm a little bit further back then than you. The guidance counselors weren't really that. It was almost like they picked and choose who they wanted to really guide because I didn't have a very good they weren't very good for guidance counseling for myself either. As I don't know what I want to do when I get out of high school because everything that I wanted to do, I was told, oh, you can't do it because you can't make money. Stop with the money.
And yet you can
So
something from like an archaeologist perspective, like maybe you can look at,
working in a
you can,
museum,
yeah, look doing that, becoming a historian with a certain stream of like a historical, that's you become an expert in. You just don't know.
yep,
I had
yep,
a student at Taekwondo who really wanted to be a director in movies and stuff. And so I wasn't like, oh, that's probably really hard and you probably could never get in or whatever. I wasn't going to say that because I just know what it was like for me. And so what I
right.
said was like, oh, I knew from my experience, like I actually found that very interesting as a possibility. I never pursued it, but I actually really found the directing side of things very interesting. And I was looking into it at one point, and I knew that Stargate, the DVDs had the ones with the director commentaries. There's these two directors that were like super, super good at it. Like they were entertaining, but they actually taught you and they said like why they did what they did. So I told him, I didn't, like I said, go listen to director commentaries, like in movies and things like that, because there's sometimes they'll tell you why they chose to do things and you can learn a lot from them. And he came back to me later and he's, thanks so much for telling me about that because I did. And it was like super good. Like it was just because he didn't think of that, but it's a way for him to have gotten more exposure into learning is something that he was interested in. And it's just so you don't know by talking to these students or kids or young adults, like what you can help them see that they didn't see. Some of them might be like, oh, I would really to be a doctor, but I know that I can't because I don't have the money or I just don't have the brain for this. But then you can actually help them go down the path and see, okay, what other medical professions are out there or
Yep,
assistants that are out there that you could possibly be involved in it that actually plays to
yep.
your strengths.
My niece, who is now an RN, and she works in the NICU ward of the hospital in Calgary, and her boyfriend is also a nurse. But he is planning on going back to school so he can actually become a doctor. So he started off as a nurse first. There's that, but there's occupational
Oh, there's
therapists, there's
so many.
physio,
So
there's
many.
so
Actually, just
many.
looking through the course availability, what courses are available at these colleges? Forget like the degrees.
Mhm.
Just actually look at
Yep.
the courses that are offered, and you can actually go, oh, because after I finished at Redeemer, like I actually found out that there was like a journalism track that I could have done instead of English as my minor. But I was looking at that. It was just, I think, brought in when I was finishing up or whatever. But I was like, man, I would have loved to do that. But I wouldn't have known if I hadn't been flipping through the course calendar and actually saw the courses that were, and then you see
Yeah.
what requirements are for those if they have prerequisite classes. And then you can actually kind of backtrack and see what degree or what minor that might
Yep.
be for, but you don't know, like, and you see, and when you go through the actual courses themselves, you might find some that you wouldn't have thought of, or some, so when we're saying things like, I try to say when I talk to kids, maybe less about if you go to college, I'll say, if you choose to go to college, or if you
Mm.
choose to get married, if you choose to have kids, because at that point, they're adults when they're making those decisions. And it's already a frustration, I think, in a lot of people that like, they're at the age where their parents still see them as kids and they see themselves as adults, even though they still have growing to do. But parents are also struggling to understand that they're adults and letting. So there's already this. They're trying to be independent and make these decisions, and by saying if you choose these things, you have that choice. It's not your choice should you get married. It's not your parents' choice should you have kids. It's not your parents' choice should you go to university, even if it's their desire that you do these things. But at that point, even going to university, unless you're like a prodigy, you're going to be an 18-year-old adult, or at very most, if you kind of sped through high school, 17-year-old almost adult, which I've known some.
Right.
And so at that point, you're still at the edge of like, if you especially as a parent, I think, especially the response that I hear this from the older teenagers. Oh, I told my parents that I didn't want to get married, and they were just like, oh, that you'll change your mind. Like they just brushed it off like it wasn't an actual decision that they were really making. It was just that you're too young to understand. And yeah, maybe they don't understand yet. And maybe in a few years they might change their mind about marriage and like that they would like to get married. But if you just brush it off like you're like patting them on the head, like there's, oh, that's cute,
Ugh.
that'll change. But you don't know. What if it doesn't change? And what if it does change, but you've made such a big deal about the fact that, oh, you're gonna change your mind because mom and dad are always right. That'll make it so much more difficult for them to come to you and be like, hey, it's oh my grandkids or whatever. Like, but if you actually like
Yeah.
release that,
You gotta, yeah, you do. You gotta release that and you gotta tone down because you never know what's going to happen. Like for myself, it was one of the sad things that I had to let go. And it is a grieving process as a mom, realizing that one, my child is never going to go to university. She's never going to have a job. She's never going to get married. She's never going to have kids. It's one of those kind of things where you have to literally, your dream literally crashes and burns. And then you're sitting there going, now what do I do with all of this that I've been carrying around, my hopes and dreams for my child that are now never going to be realized?
Would it be a different feeling though? From one parent
No.
knowing their kid could have that dream and is
Mm-hmm.
capable of having that dream,
Yep.
to a parent who knows that maybe their kid is incapable of having that dream.
Yep. And that's what I'm saying is that as a parent, know you have these dreams and in your heart, you're saying that, but it's for the best for my child. I just want the best for my child. We'd all want the best for our child. Sometimes you just have to step back and say, I know what my dreams are for my child. What if those aren't my child's
or
dreams?
God's dreams
And
for them.
or God's. Yeah. So what is more important? Is it your dreams or your child's dreams or God's
Well, could you
dreams?
imagine too, you've made such a big deal about being a grandparent, and then your child finds out they can't even have kids. They're already going to have to grieve the fact that they can't have kids or whatever. But now they have to
Yeah.
tell you, not you, but tell the parent that they're not going to be a grandparent.
Yeah.
It's just, you're just putting like way too much pressure on people when you say things like when you get married, when you have kids. And it's
Yeah.
just, and like I said, if you say, oh, if you choose to have kids or if you choose to get married, again, like the percentage probability is high that people will get married, have kids, like, or just have kids
Yeah.
or whatever in this society. But it's I think this has a lot to do with like how it helps frame our own brain. If we releasing that
Right.
to their choice, like you free your own brain, I think too. Like you start to your own thoughts and expectations by saying that. Because I said to one of the students the other day, like he's a teenager, older teenager, and I said, if you have kids, then I was going to say something. And he's, oh no, I really want to have kids. I'm like, that's great. And I said, but at the same time, like, I wasn't like, when you have kids, blah, blah, blah. And I'm great that he wants to have kids. Maybe he'll change his mind. Maybe he won't. Maybe he'll go ahead and be an awesome dad. But but it was like, they'll tell you if they are like, no, I really want married. I really want to have kids. But you also are showing them that it's like, it actually is their decision in that instead of
Yep.
laying it on them. And I think it can bring so much pressure. That's what we say, like, when are you going to get married? When are you going to have kids? You can't get a break. You barely finish college if you're lucky to not get that question burned at you, especially if you're in a Christian college. Like every time you turn around, and then it's, oh, now that you're married, like, when are you going to have kids? It's been like almost a year and nobody's pregnant. It's, you don't know. And then,
There is so many variables
right?
Yeah.
in the mix between A and B. Some parents make it sound like it's just a single decision.
Yeah.
They make you feel like almost like it's extremely easy and that everyone out there is like the perfect match for everything.
And that you should, as soon as you get married, just throw all protection out the window and be like trying to get pregnant as fast as you can, not really realizing that maybe they're not financially in that place yet, or they're still in school, or they're just trying to figure out where to live. All these things are there. You don't
Yeah.
know.
Or they're trying to work things out in their marriage about living together and becoming a couple first before introducing children into the mix.
Yeah. And if you look
There's
at
always that
it's
too.
interesting in the Old Testament where it talks about you don't send a man off to war if he just got married, let him have his year and things like that. You don't just, you give the people a year at least to get to, but everybody is almost on them with especially in the Christian culture. You got to have kids. You're getting married. You're not getting any younger. And they're like, I'm 21. It's barely
I
that
pretty
old.
much think I think I pretty much got 20 years to have
I
kids, if
know,
I'm
and
not
it's just like,
mistaken.
oh my God.
Life expectancy isn't
Right,
30.
right. But it just can be like demoralizing for the people that you're talking to. And Ted said this over and over again on this podcast is I was ready to sign up for marriage and being a mom. Like I was there. I'm like, this is what you're supposed to do. Yes, I'm ready. I'm here. I'm willing. But it never happened. But when you're constantly told when you get married, when you have kids, you're going, when is when? Because I'm here. I'm ready. And it doesn't mean that it will happen. And it's just, if you start to just,
Aren't you just being too picky?
right?
I'm sure there was somebody
Probably I
available.
should just grab the first person off the street and then just went with it. Probably couldn't have picked much worse.
Yeah, that reminds me. I'm watching this drama and can't remember which one it was because I've watched too many of them. Where they say, you know what? Oh, it must be like on American TV or something. I dare you to kiss the first person who walks through the door. And the first person that walks through the door is definitely this. Oh, okay. It's almost that kind of an attitude. It's just like, maybe you should just grab the first single person that comes your way. The first single person that came my way was like 95. It was 40. I don't think
I know.
so.
And you just sit there and you try, and then you sit there and go, but it must be me. It must be like you're all expecting this. It must be something that I'm doing wrong. That this is the way it's put all the time. It's a given. It's easy. You just boom.
Yep.
There's no difficulties.
Then you start thinking this.
So
Then you think there's something wrong
yeah,
with
exactly.
you.
If it's so
What's
easy,
wrong with
then
me?
what am I doing wrong?
Yep.
And then there's so many people that are asking this question, like some of these Facebook groups I'm on, like I said, just to see what people are talking about with being single and dating. It's just ready. I'm here. I'm like, what's wrong? Why can't I find someone? And it's just,
I think we're just coming out of a time where life expectancy was maybe 40 or 50 years. So if you have that life expectancy, your parents or your grandparents have to rush the whole thing. So they're probably married by 15 or 16 or 17
yeah,
and having kids by the time they're 18 or 19 and 20. Because of innovation and medical advancements, our expectancies are now in the 80s, 90s, 100s, which means we have 50 years.
yeah.
Technically. If you think that the average girl, because girls are the ones whose biological clocks end faster than a guy's. So, say from the time, even at 18 years old, she can technically still have children until she's 45. After 45, it's much more difficult. I
Well,
wouldn't recommend it.
it's reversed too at the same time. You could probably have children when you're 12 to 14,
Yes, but that
right?
doesn't mean it's right.
No, I'm not saying I'm
Yeah,
saying that at some point in history, the life expectancy was probably 25, 30, so they're probably
yeah.
married by 14, 15 years. And I believe this was around more in the medieval era. And by the time they were 15 or 16, they probably were having kids,
Probably.
right?
But now, but it is that thing is like where people say you're running out of time when technically she probably has 25 years
Yeah,
to
and
have
not
kids.
everybody needs a billion kids. Some people would like to
No.
have lots of kids and they have
Mm.
lots of kids, and some people maybe want one kid. And we shouldn't
My
guilt them
my
into that.
grandparents had, like, 7.
Yeah, I was like my brother had one brother has 7, the other one has 1 and 1 on the way. So I have 0. So the averages in our family shape and helps with that. But I was finding it interesting when we're reading the Old Testament. If you actually look, Isaac was married at 40. Jacob was most likely in his 70s or 80s when he married Rachel and Leah. Joseph was 30 when he entered Pharaoh's service and married Asenath.
This is after the flood,
Yes.
though, 'cause before the flood, people were, like,
So
400 and having
what was
kids.
even interesting then is it was like they were actually said the ages and they were like over 100 when they actually had their first kid. So it
Yeah.
wasn't like they were like 20 and they had a number of years. So even though there are some I think that do get married younger, it's just an insane thing to have when we say, oh, we need to get married so young. And then you actually look at some of the examples that you can find in the scripture. I'm not saying all of them are older. I'm just saying that all of them are like 18, 17,
Well,
16. There's some that are
I
40,
think
50, 60 getting married for the first time and having maybe 1 or 2 kids. And then some of them have more, some of them have less. It's like, this is not a prescribed,
look at how old Abraham, look at how old Abraham and Sarah were when they had their first
right?
kid.
Yeah.
Mind you, that was with God's
Yes,
intervention,
yes.
but that's okay.
Poor Sarah, 100-year-old.
And,
Poor
you're all
Sarah.
you also have to also consider at that time too probably was is that whatever God modified in our genetic structure from to make us go from, like, 900 to 1,200 years old down to 100, she was probably still lingering and slowly degrading
Right?
over
And
time.
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see that people don't actually they don't take those ones into account. They don't take like
No.
Isaac marrying at 40. But it's just if you're 40 now, regardless if you're a man or a woman and you've never married, man, they look at the looks you get in church or the weirdness that you get. And I'm
Yep.
like, hello. And it's just you can
It's a rush job to try to drift you away from God.
Yep.
I feel like it's something that Satan would try to push towards. Gotta do this in this much shorter time, so all your focus has to be in
Mhm.
here,
Yep.
right? Because if your focus is in the first 10, 15 years and Christ comes back within that time, then, oh, it's
You
too late
notice that
now.
people don't say
So I
when you're
think he's
single. They don't go, when you're single, then you'll be able to do this. Then you're single, then you'll understand this. Unless you're going through like a really horrible marriage. And then they're like, when you're single, you can celebrate.
Well, Paul does.
Yeah.
Paul talks
Well,
about
he
it.
does. Yeah.
Like he wishes everybody.
Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
just saying, like, the
It's-
general, like, when people say when you're married, when you have kids, it's not
yeah.
when you're single. There's never a point when they think that that's something positive to encourage you in that, oh, when you're single, you're going to be able to fill in the blank. Like, there's not that teaching ever
Yeah.
or saying
Yeah.
ever.
Yeah.
There's no saying that says when you're single. And if you're single, even then you can say if you're single, then just changing that when to if, it can be such a big game changer
Yeah.
for not just you as a person, but for the people that are hearing from you.
And the thing too is that David touched on something that I went, that's a very interesting thought that if we have the amount of single people out doing God's work, but Satan is going around saying, no, you've got to get married and have kids. That's your mandate. Forget everything else. Forget doing all this other stuff. You need to get married and have kids because that's the most important thing. And that becomes a different distraction. So what about that
Oh,
thought?
exactly. That's a good one. That's a good point. If you're not focusing and using your singleness in fully, then you're not doing God's work while you're single if you're not using it.
Right.
And so if you're constantly spending all your single time on the fact that you're not married or trying to get married or trying to go to events and get on groups and go on dating apps and doing all this, like your whole mind is focused on the fact that all your friends are getting married and you aren't, and all your friends are having kids and you aren't. I say all with sort of sarcastic quotes because it's not all, it just feels like that because a lot of people tend to do it at once. And then you aren't actually realizing you've been distracted from the reality of where you are based on your dissatisfaction, your discontent, external expectations, and internal expectations, instead of actually embracing where you are in the moment and
Yeah.
saying, like, how's the moment? So, yeah, it's a good point, David and Monique. But yeah, it's definitely like, yeah, we talked about like Paul saying, I wish all of you were as I am. But each of you has your own gift from God, and one has this gift and another has that. Now to the unmarried widows I say it. It is good for them to stay unmarried as I do.
I just scrolled down past to verse 17, where he says, "Nevertheless, each person should live as a believer in whatever situation the Lord has assigned to them, just as God has called them. This is the rule I lay down in all the churches." It's interesting because we don't see that either. You're supposed to live as a believer regardless of your circumstance,
Yeah.
whatever
Again,
status you are.
that backs up the point where it's a distraction, like Monique said.
Yeah.
And I think that's why some people are like, oh, it was interesting when I was talking about before we did a couple times ago when we talked about what would a singles ministry look like in your church to really help singles and stuff like that. When we're talking about that one. And a lot of people, there were actually quite a few comments that were like, it shouldn't be a singles ministry. It should be just treating everybody equally. But I think there is a point to having ministries that are focused to certain people in certain times of their life because it helps them
Right.
understand that where they are. And if you just start
Yeah.
painting a broad brush stroke over it, then people don't understand what it means to be living in the current time of their life. Like there is a broad, I think, in your church sermons, and then there is broad, I think, and sometimes in some Bible study groups. But then if you want to actually get, okay, how do I live as a Christian in singleness? How do I live as a Christian as a young adult, as a business person? There's all these things
Yeah.
that you can help them to understand, and it's easier to do in more of a narrowed ministry. So
Yeah.
I think when it comes to like our talking, if we're talking things like, hey, when you're single, or if you're single, this is the area that we need to explore and do and actually
Mhm.
treat it like it's like an exciting and yeah,
Dynamic
it's
and
like it's
yeah.
people this there's just such a bad
Yeah.
rap to being single. It's just
See, because most churches will have the women's Bible study. So all the women get together. It's
it's
usually on a
usually
Wednesday
in the
morning
morning, and I don't understand that in this day and age.
because most of the women who go to these things are young moms with babies.
And they just want to
So
get
they're
out
at
and they need to
home.
get out
They want to
and
get
that's
out.
good.
The kids go into the nursery where somebody else takes care of them and they've got a few minutes to just sit there, which is
And
not a
not a bad
bad
thing.
thing.
Sometimes it's good for moms to get together and help each other out and
Yep.
things.
Yep. And a lot of grandmothers go because now they're
Mhm.
retired and stuff like that. But if you're a working woman,
Yeah.
is there anything for you?
It's very hard to find one that's not in the
It's
morning.
very hard. Yeah. Yeah. So then we've got life groups, which is a very general. They put people together. They did try to have one that was just single people. That was okay, but I don't think it went very far because most single people find themselves really busy because you got a lot of other things on your
Well, it's
plate.
hard to make ends meet as a
So
single person. So you're usually very busy working,
yeah,
as we can attest.
they, yeah. They say here in BC, 1 in 4 people are living paycheck to paycheck. I think I'm one of
Yeah,
those
just trying to
4.
get those paychecks to touch. It's hard part.
And you're one of those 4, so that's 2.
I don't know what David's doing
Hmm.
pretty good, maybe.
How are you doing, David? Paycheck to
I
paycheck?
actually I have very little wiggle room, but it used to be paycheck to paycheck, but I'm doing a bit better now.
You're
The
doing a bit
business
better?
is taking
That's
off,
good.
and
There you
That's
go.
good.
That's good.
But so you're able to
Yeah.
see your
So
singleness in that way because you can
yeah.
put into your school and your work things that you would have to give up if you were in a relationship in a sense because you would have to make time and room for your spouse. That's normal. But if you're single, then you
Mhm.
have that ability to, like you're doing your schooling and
yeah,
your
but
business.
you gotta understand my mindset too from all of this. I'm
Your
with the
mindset.
mindset that most of everything is just useless or meaningless. So even the money I make or even the business that I am working on, it's not fulfilling in the same way as when if you're not someone who believes. It's something that allows you to get to interact with people as I rambled off in the last episode. It's a way to interact with people in different communities.
And that's what's interesting about too, because we always get told things about like evangelizing or your gifts for the glory of God, but it's always talked about in such ethereal ways that there's not practical advice as much. And I think when it comes to it, like David said, we are by doing the things that you're good at and getting involved in these different things, then you actually get a part of different people's lives that you otherwise wouldn't have. And by doing
Mhm.
the taekwondo and being a part of the taekwondo school and stuff, like I'm living out my faith in my community with all the people that come in. And we have a variety of faiths and and sexualities and all these things that come in. And I'm not like starting everyone with prayer and spouting off everything, but I'm also like the way that I live. And I'm not, so I'm like, I feel like parents are important and that what they say should go. So I will support the parents. And I am just like Taekwondo. They want their things to be truthful and respectful and these things. And then I'm also not afraid to say things like, oh yeah, when I was in church on Sunday, or, oh, I'm so frustrated because sometimes I have to work Sundays. That means I can't go to church. And so people know that I have this faith. And it actually has led to have conversations with people who ask about my faith
Hmm.
and want to understand
Yep.
where I'm coming from and how it's different from other faiths. And it leads to conversations that if I was just trying to sit in a church and be a church ministry, which is not bad for those who are called to it, but sometimes there's this idea that everybody should be doing that. Then I'm not out in the world actually doing it.
Yeah. If everybody had a ministry
Oh
that
my
was
gosh,
sitting in the church,
the
there'd be nobody out in
amount
the
of
community.
guys on these Christian dating sites, like it drove me crazy. Like I do not want to marry a pastor. And yet every single guy would say either I'm in ministry or I'm doing this job, but what I really want to do is be a pastor. And you're like, not everybody's called to be a pastor, dude. It's fine if you are, but it was like, I'm doing this, but I really want. And I'm like, every single one, like everyone, all of you, like it would drive me bonkers. Like it actually is a pet peeve. And if I see that in like their profile, I'd be like, nope, because it was just like, it just drove me crazy. Because there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with being a pastor, but I don't think God's calling every single man to be a pastor. But I feel like
To be a pastor.
somehow that they felt like that was what they had to say. I'm in computer programming, but what I really want to be is a pastor, or I'm in the medical field, but what I really want
Because
to be
that
is a
makes
pastor.
them
Yeah, like it was like that's what they would say. It would literally be like almost word for word, like every single
it
one,
because it'll make me sound more
right?
holy.
And it might be like the same for women. Oh, I'm doing this job, but what I really want to be is a mom or wife or something like where they seem very domestic, and while they're being in the workforce, it's not their whole career. There's probably, I don't know, because I didn't look at women's ones obviously. Maybe I don't know, I don't think, maybe I said that too, I don't know, maybe there was like pet peeve ones that women would say that guys are like, what, every single woman? But I think there's like that thing, you could be saying that to your kids too, if you're like, oh, you should always be going for the glory of God, like always be out there witnessing and ministering. And it's, yeah, but that looks different for each person. And it doesn't have to be you sitting on a street corner or going door to door or actually working in the church, which again, nothing wrong with that. And some people are called to it. There's our kitty. So,
Yes, with his cute little orange bow.
yes,
We had a little fluffer butt walk past the cameras.
yes. The hero and his cuteness. So,
Yes.
so yes,
He is adorable.
he is.
And the way we have my little brother visiting from Calgary, and Hero has an issue with him for some unknown reason. It's really, what's up with that, weirdo?
So yes,
We just chuckled.
so yeah, so like I think it's not like we have to police all the words, but I think if
No,
we just actually reflect
be a
on
little
how
bit
we're
more
yeah, like
mindful.
be a little just reflect a little bit on what you're saying, because a lot of times we just say things because that's what we were told and that's what our parents were told. It's just you say it because it's a saying, Like, "Oh, when you get married, then" that's usually, like a tease or a joke sometimes. It's,
Yeah.
"Oh, when you get married, then you'll" and it's a joke, or "When you have kids, you'll
Yeah.
and it's a joke.
Wait till you have kids, then you'll understand how frustrating you
Yeah,
are.
right? Or a
Okay.
threat like, "When you have kids, I hope one's just like you."
Yes, I've had that one too. It's like, I didn't realize I was such a
Bad kid,
was I a bad kid? Am I a bad kid or a good kid?
So, but I think if we just actually reflect on what we're saying to people and actually understand how we're maybe, like, trying to express
I have to escape.
if you have to like, express towards people, like, what they're doing. So, again, when versus if is a big thing to do, but it's easy to do, I think. But it's sometimes it's easy in theory, but a lot of times we say things without thinking. So if we're just always saying when, then it's harder for you to change that to if you're not really thinking about what you're saying. But I think we
Mhm.
should be more mindful of what we're saying. And I think by just changing when to if you don't change anything else, you just try to look at the how you talk and try to change the whens to ifs in the appropriate places, then it actually can not only help the person you're talking to, but actually shift your own mindset. Like it actually, because I try to be conscientious of how I'm using those words. And by changing how I've been using them in my own life, it's changed my perspective on a lot of things in a good way, I think. And
I think it's just a misplace of trust. Do you trust the person to define your life or God? So instead of doing when or ifs, I think it's just, do you trust the person that's telling you get married? And when are you getting married? When are you getting married? Do you trust that person, or do you trust God with your anxieties and stress and your life in general? So I think it's more a misplace in trust than
I
anything.
think a lot of times too, about young people, if they grow up hearing the same thing over and over again, they start to believe it, that this is what is supposed to happen, and have a hard time separating that from what God might have in store for them, because they are led to believe, but I've been told my whole life that
and often
I will get married and have
often by people
kids.
you trust and love, like your parents
Yeah.
or your
Yeah.
pastor or family members, like
Yeah.
people that you trust and love.
And children don't, yeah, and children don't try to define trust between their parents and God, because you would think as a Christian parent, you are trustworthy enough for your kids that they would trust what you say, because you're not an abusive parent. You're not a perpetual liar, and they know that you care for them. So they trust you in that aspect. This is how we build up our trust in God too, is because it first comes from our parents who teaches us about trust and stuff
And
like
love,
that.
yeah. And yeah, so I think, yeah, just leaving with the thought of just think about some of the words that you say and how you say it. Is it just something you say it because that's what everybody says and it's just that's what happens? Or what is it that you're perhaps like, what's coming with that? What expectations are coming with those words? And are they helpful for people? So just looking at how you're saying things, and then instead of, like we've said before many times, instead of asking someone, "Oh, do you have a boyfriend yet or a girlfriend?" Be like, "Hey, what's new with you?" Because
Hmm.
if there's a new
Hmm.
boyfriend or girlfriend, they will tell you if they're excited about it and they think it's something. And if it's not something yet, then it's not something you want to talk about yet.
And that's the thing too, because a lot of times when you're really new in a relationship, you're in that euphoria state where you're just like, I'm not sure where this is going yet. And a lot of times you may not know for a while. It may be a few weeks, maybe even a few months before I think I can keep dating this person for a while longer and see where that goes. Because sometimes you date somebody and go, ew, maybe not.
Yeah. And then there's why you're not dating that person anymore if they're really insistent on knowing your entire relationship life.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I went on a date with this guy, and yeah, what we seem to have hit it off. And then you go on the next date and yeah, the way you chew annoys me. I'm going.
Yeah, it's just so it's just a
Because that's really a thing, in case
it's
anybody's
called the ick,
wondering.
apparently.
The
It's like
ick
give you the
factor.
ick.
Yeah.
But yeah, just adjusting, like you said, when to if, and even things like instead of asking specifics like, "Hey, are you dating someone?" or "When are you gonna have kids?" You say, "Hey, is anything new?" And then they will tell you what's new and what's important. And then you might find out things
Yeah.
that aren't specific. Like maybe they have something that's new that's not relationship related. So instead of just saying, no, I'm not seeing anybody, and that's where it ends, it actually like, hey, yeah, I'm doing X, Y, and Z, and I'm super excited. And you end up in a conversation that's much better. Oh, people can get a really good view of Hero's Halloween collar.
These little Halloween little fellows.
Yes.
His chubby little face. Are you a
It's not
handsome
even
boy?
October yet.
I know, but I went to
Yes. Oh,
one
one
more
more
day. I went to
day.
PetSmart to pick up some food, and he needed a collar, and those were actually cheaper than the regular collars.
Guess they're like my mom when it comes to Christmas. It's days before December, she has the Christmas tree up and she's the
Oh,
lights.
I know people who are always saying, "Don't judge me. I got my Christmas tree up. It's still September."
Yeah. I did get Zeus's Halloween
Yeah.
costume, but that's because usually everything's picked through by this time of year, and it's hard to find something in his size. So I actually went to Winners, and it was so I was like, I better get it because otherwise if I wait, everything's just tiny and it doesn't fit him. So it's cute.
Yep.
So, but yeah. Anyway, well, leave it there for today. Just some thoughts. So just think maybe a little more about how you say things and how it might be perceived by people who are listening, and how it might help if we just slightly adjust how we're saying things, and help encourage people, especially single people, to not feel like they're failures and actually feel and that there's something wrong with them, and instead that they're in a vibrant, exciting time of their life as a single person rather than it's a stopgap between and marriage.
Can I do the ending
Sure.
thing, the scriptural encouragement? Because I think it's pretty cool that you put Isaiah 56:3-5, where God honors those who are single, as seen as his words to the eunuchs, promising them a name greater than that of sons and daughters. So it says, "Let no foreigner who is bound to the Lord say, the Lord will surely exclude me from his people. And let no eunuch complain, I am only a dry tree. To them I will give within my temple and its walls a memorial and a name better than sons and daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that will endure forever."
Amen.
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 So
Amen.
we'll leave that here for now. If you enjoyed our podcast, please get subscribed so you'll never miss an episode. And you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and X. And if you would like to email us, it is route77ministries@gmail.com. That's ROUTE 77ministries@gmail.com. Or visit our website at route77.ca. Other than that, we'll see you all here next time.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
That's a wrap for today's episode. We've covered a lot of ground on how the words we use can shape not just expectations, but also the way singles see their own journey. By shifting from when you get married to if you get married, we create more room for people to embrace whatever path God has for them, whether that includes kids, marriage, or a life of singleness with purpose. If today's discussion resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. And as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you here next time on the Route 77 podcast. Remember to live your single life to its fullest.